Getting these Hot Wheels apart, or in this case a Lightning Johnny, isn't too difficult. You got a couple rivets that you're going to drill out, and then they just pop apart. Right here's a small one that holds the glass in place, and we're going to take and grind that down, and we're going to pop the glass out as well. Now my whole concept was to be able to have a key come out of the front of it, so I need to find a spot for that, and thankfully the Integra has a good grill for that. And I'm going to come at it from both sides, and I'm going to use various bits I have. These bits were like $3 on Amazon. But for being really cheap, they sure work out nice. As I'm cleaning that up, I want to mention that this project was one of those projects where you got out of your comfort zone, and my comfort zone is fine details and stuff, and part of that is because of the fact my eyesight really isn't the greatest, and that's going to become apparent later in a spectacular way. Now I knew I could take a little thickness off of this key, and I really wanted to bring out the brass look of it. If you guys go to try to make one of these yourself, I will let you know that it is many hours of work. Right here, this little notch is getting in my way, so I'm going to thin that down a little bit. A little wet sanding to get it polished up. I'm not going to be done polishing it, but that gets it closer. Now I use the calipers as a measuring guide, so that way I could import this into Fusion, and then I could make this little piece that's going to go on the bottom. You could take and get a piece of plastic and just cut it with some scissors too. Even though I just got the cloth on the end of a drill, this really buffed it up nicely. I tried sticking with simple tools so that way other people could replicate it. I figure all these are fairly affordable, and a drill about every household has. And that really shined it up nice. It's even better in person. Now I gotta make a slot for the key to fit into the bottom. If you guys feel some of this is too dangerous, go ahead and comment below. I wouldn't do that. But keep in mind, everybody's got their own safety margin. For me, I did have this grab the part a couple times and fling it right out of my fingers, but because I was prepared for it at all times, I didn't get hurt. And I assumed my own risk. But I will have to admit, looking back at it, it looks terrifying. Now I knew eventually I was going to end up cutting through to where these seats were going to fall out, so I took and I put some CA glue in various spots to strengthen it. I tried to do it where it wouldn't be seen very well, and I think it worked out in the end, but you let me know. So from there I could continue shaving the bottom to get it thick enough for the key, or should I say thin enough. My goal right here is so that way it sticks flush and straight and slides in and out good. And I used various tools for this. You could get by with a lot less. You could get by with just a file and maybe a single rotary bit. But if you have the tools, why not use the tool? Now I wanted to make the wheels as close to the edge as possible, so I did take and do some filing on the side fenders and rear quarter panels. One of the most difficult parts on something this size and scale is trying to get it where the wheels turn, but yet they look like they're tucked right up by those fenders. And if you look right here, you can see how good my eyesight is. Yeah, it was that hard for me to get it under there. So these tires for my liking were too thick. Now these are tires that you can buy separate off Amazon, but I didn't like them. They didn't look rubber band enough for me. And I had to custom order these rims so that way they would match my son's. However, these ones, the spokes didn't stick out far enough, like they weren't far enough to the edge. So therefore I'm going to take some of this down, and that's also going to help the key fit, so it works out as a double bonus. It does mean the wheels are a little bit wobbly, but it's okay. Now for tires, I thought it was IQ 28 in order to use this heat shrink tubing. It's going to provide that black rubber look, but also be very low profile. Right here I'm bending the axles so that way they're going to be out of the way and I can glue them down. I really almost should have took and watched a video on how other people do this. But I made it through it and I think they turned out pretty well and pretty straight. I did watch one of those customized Hot Wheels videos in the past, and they do a marvelous job, so don't think I'm going to try to compete with that. But this was a great exercise for me to challenge my attention to detail, my eyesight, and my patience most of all. Now, although you see me using Scotch tape on the windshield here, I'm going to recommend that you do not do it. I thought it'd be pretty smart. I should have used electrical tape instead. But this stuff, for whatever reason, didn't want to come off at all, and it's one of those scenarios where when you try to get it off, it's just little flecks and pieces, and it's so annoying. So after putting tape on the inside and the outside to protect it from paint, I took and I glued it back in. If it wasn't for me making this into a key and all the other steps, if you were just customizing it, it would be better to paint it before you put the window back in. So now I decided that I was going to use a spray can instead of airbrush for the black, because I was hoping it would smooth some of it out, and it actually did a really good job. After a test fit, that can be glued in. If you guys aren't on a full bottle of glue, I would recommend getting a new one so you don't have this big of a nozzle to deal with. Now instead of like a molding clay or an epoxy, I decided I was going to use JB Weld, because I had it, and it sets quick. Now this is one of those scenarios where the harder you try to stay still, the worse it gets. And it really didn't help that I had coffee and an energy drink right before this. Now here I'm just applying some, and then I'm sanding it back and applying some and sanding it back and forth. And while I waited for some of that to set up, I glued the spring in here. What this spring is going to do is it's going to allow the key to go forward and almost make like a locking position. So I made this little plate so that way the key has something to slide against instead of the spring. And I found a Lego that fits perfectly in here. That saved me from having to 3D print something. Now while I was doing this, I went back and forth and basically filled in the low spots and then added some more. If you feel like you're failing, just keep going, because you can just take it off and you can apply some more. Now something you're going to notice is that the rear bumper, I put the most attention into trying to make it look similar to his. Now I bent the axles in the shape that I needed. A lot of these took a little refining and bending back and forth, so keep that in mind. And then I glued them in place, checking to make sure the clearance was good. Now I went back and I added some more glue to reinforce it, and I actually did this a couple times in a couple different spots because I wanted it to be able to hold up somewhat well. Now with that all fitting nice, I can test fit the bottom. I did have to trim a little bit of it up, and again you could just grab a piece of plastic for this, cut it down with some scissors, it'd work the same. This might be the last project this glue sees, I don't know. And again, don't mean to go back and forth, but I had to wait for it to cure, so I'm kind of doing this in steps. I did know that I wanted to get this bottom part, this plate on, before I did the side skirts, because the side skirts are actually going to kind of go over that, and they're going to kind of strengthen each other. So the side skirts are going to be part held on by the plastic bottom, and the plastic bottom is going to be part held in by the side skirts. Now for the look I'm going for this rear bumper, this is the picture I had to go by. Now something you're going to notice is that the rear bumper, I put the most attention into trying to make it look similar to his versus the side skirts and the front bumper. And the reason why is because he's not done with his car. So I'm going to take and I'm going to add side skirts even though he doesn't currently have them. And I'm also going to take and add a little bit extra to the front bumper even though he hasn't picked that out, and that way he can take and he can add it later, or he can send it back to me and I can refine it to match. Now I don't know if I'd bring up a culture war since this is technically not a Hot Wheels, it's a Johnny Lightning, but a lot of people refer to Hot Wheels as being these 1/64th scale cars, and I figured that it would probably get a few more views. So I'm sorry if that bothered anybody. Let me know in the comments below if there's actually a culture thing behind that or not. Now these pieces on the front bumper, that's where I really had a challenge. While I'm carving in some details, if you guys have any suggestions, I want to do another one of these for my other son, and maybe even one for my daughter, who knows. But if you have some suggestions to make this a little easier, let me know. Decided to try to stuff the window so that way it wouldn't get paint in it. This actually worked fairly well. Now I started off using a water-based paint in the paint gun, so if you see how some of it chips off through the video and then I end up fixing it, stuff like that, I did end up going with effectively spray paint that was white instead, like the one that says it's for plastics, and it worked out better. The water-based stuff just didn't stick very well. I thought it'd be really smart to use a marker to get these black areas, but it is so hard to do details like that. Now here's a mistake with the Scotch tape, and actually what I ended up deciding to do anyways is I repainted it white, so that way I could make it black so it looked tinted. For an exhaust tip, I decided to take a pen apart, and after cleaning it out, I glued it in place. Then I used this method of just using a paper clip in order to apply the paint on the front turn signals. This actually worked out way better than I thought it would. I'm pretty positive if I tried a normal paintbrush I would have failed. And of course I had to buff off the white that I'd gotten on the key. Again, you'll see that come back and go away as I add a couple layers. And I thought it was so cool that the original had the wiper blades black, so I had to try it. Now every time I use Scotch tape the way it's intended, it never holds on to anything, but boy, I tell you, I didn't want to let go of this model for nothing.
Now you will see 2 iterations of the final product, and that's because of the fact I went back and retouched it up. I think I did better except for the back window. I really need to come back and airbrush that, but I wasn't around my airbrush and I want to show you guys how it turned out. Let me know what you think.
Very satisfying click. I'm going to glue that up, and that's how he'll get it.